I don't do this to be right. I don't do this because I think I have all the answers, because trust me, I don't. I do this because I spent years in and out of treatment centers that recycled the same old bullshit over and over again, because I watched people that I love die while being told it was their fault for not working the steps hard enough, because I believed the lie that if I just surrendered more, or if I got more honest, or if I trusted the process, that I'd be okay. And then when that didn't work, I thought it was because I was the broken one. I do this because I know what it's like to leave the program and feel completely untethered, because I know how hard it is to even think for yourself when your entire identity has been built around being powerless. Because I know there are people out here dying, not from the drugs, but from the shame, the isolation, and the bullshit treatment that doesn't work. I'm doing this to expose the lies, the money, the manipulation, and to help burn down the treatment industry as it currently exists. Because this is not care. This is not healing. It's a pipeline of power, profit, and recycled trauma disguised as recovery. And I want to replace it with something that actually serves people. Something that doesn't punish you for using or criminalize your pain. Something rooted in truth, harm reduction, autonomy, and real support. I'm not anti-recovery. I'm anti-bullshit. Welcome back to the Recovery Rebellion, where we bust down the myths, challenge the dogma, and keep it real about harm reduction and recovery. I'm your host, Tara Grace. I go by Burn the Stigma on social media, and today we're touching on a few things, including the idea that maybe some of these 12-steppers who comment on my TikToks are right. Maybe I wasn't a real addict. So let's get into it. I remember sitting in meeting after meeting, rehab after rehab, carrying the message to one detox to the next. And I remember part of my story, so to speak, right, was that I don't drink, I don't use any substance because I know if I do, by the end of the night, I'll have a needle in my arm. And I always said it with like such conviction, and I believed it, right? And other people believed it. Everyone around me believed that to be true. But there were plenty of times that it didn't happen that way, but it did always eventually, like if I drank one night, then eventually I would end up going on another run. Once I started going to treatment, every time that I would use again, it was always like I would just take off and go on a run, and it would just always be balls to the wall insane, until towards the end of my treatment tour, when I was going in and out of treatment, I was trying to not live that chaotic lifestyle. Even though I was still using, I was buying pee off of people and still trying to go through the motions because I was sick of it. But I didn't know how to stop. I was so confused. I knew the program wasn't working, but I kept trying to make it work. I was locked in this fear that anytime I did use a substance, even if it didn't happen that night, then it definitely was going to happen. And I do wonder, all of those times that it did it happen because I thought it was going to happen? Or did it just naturally happen? Or was it part of that whole self-fulfilled prophecy? I'm never gonna know, but it's interesting to think about. Fast forward to today, and after years of deprogramming and just learning about so many things, when people do pop into my comments, because I'm able to use cannabis without it turning into chaos or without it turning into me sticking a needle in my arm, people are like, well, maybe you're just not a real addict then. And before, that used to really piss me off. But now I don't even get mad about it. I'm like, maybe I wasn't a quote unquote real addict as the program defines it. Maybe I was just someone in a really dark, chaotic chapter of my life, and I needed help and not a life sentence of a label. Our families are desperate to get, my mom used to always say, I just wanted to get my daughter back, and they'll pay thousands into the treatment industry. And then once we get into treatment, we're told we're powerless and that we have this disease for the rest of our life. But it's like, how do you know that? So many of us go in so early. So many young people get slapped with that label, that addict for life label, and then they get programmed into all of those beliefs at such a young age because that narrative lines pockets. It overlooks like one incredibly crucial fact that I had no idea about, but most people grow out of chaotic use on their own. Research shows that. Let's drop some actual data that the recovery industry sure as hell does not tell us about. Maturing out is a real thing. Multiple studies have showed that majority of people who meet the criteria for substance use disorder in their late teens and early 20s reduce or stop problematic use by their 30s, even without formal treatment. One large study found that about 25% of those diagnosed with substance use disorder in their 20s still met that criteria by age 35. That means that 75% either moderated or quit altogether on their own terms. So researchers call this phenomenon natural recovery or spontaneous remission or maturing out. And it's super common, but nobody talks about it because there's no money to be made off of it. When I see these young 20-somethings talking about how they have this label, addict for life, powerless for life label, I worry because statistically they're most likely to grow out of it, but you're never gonna know that if you are stuck in a system that profits off of your fear and your family's desperation, right? Like nobody's going to tell your family member that there's a chance that or a huge chance that they're going to age out of it. And the thing that with the illicit supply of today, it's so deadly that it's not giving people the opportunity to age out of it, which just makes harm reduction all that much more important to have the conversation around. Harm reduction is always important no matter what, but there are so many people, like, we do just need to keep them alive because statistics show they're probably going to age out of this if we can just keep them alive long enough. Now, I know harm reduction is not about keeping people alive until they make it to recovery. It's just about keeping people alive, period. Whether they choose recovery down the line or not. It doesn't matter. And let me say this, I am not saying that substance use disorder isn't real or that formal support can't help, because of course it can. But I'm saying that the programming of your mind can be just as powerful, if not more, than any substance, right? Like if you hear you are powerless, you're going to believe that you can't make decisions for yourself. And the disease model itself, I made a TikTok today and I was saying how it's funny. People will say to me sometimes when I talk about the harm in their rooms, they'll be like, you just don't want to take accountability. But the funny thing is that the 12-step model, the allergy model, you want to talk about not taking accountability. I mean, where's the accountability? And once I put one in me, I can't stop, right? Like we tell people that all the time. There's no accountability there versus, if you use today, that doesn't mean that you are off to the races and you have to throw everything away. You can make the decision. Do you want to continue to use or do you not? Like it's not automatic that once you've set off this phenomenon of craving that now you've lost all control. I don't know. I think it's just the irony there is funny because they always tell me like, you don't want to take accountability, but it's like, who's taking accountability with that? Because you're certainly not. If you mature out on your own, that's a win. That's great. And whether you stay sober or moderate, the goal is a fulfilling life, not a perfect adherence to dogma and abstinence, because as I say all the time, some of the most fucked up people that I know are 100% abstinent. So that really doesn't mean anything in terms of quality of life. I just think it's so scandalous to slap this label, this addict for life label. And when I say this, I know that substance use disorder is obviously a person with substance use disorder is the correct language. But when talking about this, that is what people are doing. They're not slapping the label of substance use disorder for life. They're slapping the addict label. So sometimes when I talk about this stuff, I'm going to use their language just for sake of the conversation. And I apologize if that bothers anybody, but to me, it's what makes the most sense. I'm saying what people are saying, and what people are saying is that they're not using the person first language. But I think we need more conversation around things like natural recovery, because people don't know about it. I remember when I was in Texas, I remember encountering people who were 16, 17 with that label. And it's like, you have no idea. Like, somebody can be in chaotic use for years, but not be an quote unquote addict for life. Like, it's insane that is so normalized. I hope that it's being less normalized, but from what I see on social media, it's not. There's so many early 20 somethings, and I hope that this doesn't offend anybody, because I feel like while I'm saying this, if I was in my early 20s working my ass off in my recovery, I may take some offense to this, but I'm not saying that you haven't had a chaotic relationship with drugs that you need to heal from. But you having a chaotic relationship with drugs in your teenage years, in your early 20s, does not mean that you have to have this label for the rest of your life. I think majority of us, we have some other reason that we're using drugs chaotically. Like, some people just use drugs recreationally, but those of us who end up reliant on drugs and having a very chaotic relationship, typically there's some other reason that we're using the drugs, whether it's a coping skill or whatever. Once we can figure that out, then the chaotic relationship with the drugs tends to go away. I'm not saying that there's nobody in the world that is just, how do I say this? There's definitely, I'm not going to say that there's nobody in the world that exists that from a young age and all until the day that they die, they can't ever touch a substance, because yes, when they do put one substance in their body, they are just completely mindless and they have no control. I am sure that those people do exist, but I think the magnitude of which those people exist is on such a much smaller scale than what we are led to believe. So many of us are taught when we go into treatment or go into the rooms that one is too many and 1,000 is never enough, right? That once we put one in, we will never be satisfied. We're just like, drugs, give me more drugs. And I'm not going to say there wasn't a time in my using that it really felt and looked like that, right? Like there was absolutely a time where I was just like on drug mode, and it was all about the drugs, didn't care what happened as long as I got high. 100% there was a time in my life like that. But that was after I had been fed all this information about what an addict is like. Do we become that because that's what we're told that we are? I don't know. I can't be certain, but I do know that there's plenty of information that lets us know most people aren't an addict for life, right? That you can recover, that you can move on. And that's great news. Like, I don't know why people get upset about that. Like, that's good news. But people don't like to hear that. People say I have a dangerous message. And it's like, this isn't coming from me. Like, this is stuff that I've read and looked into and can show you links. But people don't want to look at it. People just want to believe what they've been told. And I get it, because if you're living your life a certain way because you think your life depends on it, to be told something different it's mind-blowing. And I know, because I've been there. I know what it's like to be putting all my blood, sweat, and tears into this program because I think my life depends on it. And then even though it didn't happen till after I left, it was still such a slap in the face to think of how many years I spent trying to make that program work, because I 100% believed that if I did not find a way for that program to work, I was going to end up dead. I truly believed that the program and these steps was my only salvation away from chaotic drug use. And I think a lot of people feel that. A lot of people get introduced to the program that way. And I always have pushback from 12-steppers who say, well, then don't do the program. You don't have to do the program. And it's like, Right. People don't have to do the program, but there's a couple things with that. A, you never have to step foot into a meeting to have a head full of 12-step dogma and 12-step rhetoric, because the entire recovery culture is based around that dogma. And that's the problem, right? Is that people aren't really getting a choice when it comes to a lot of those beliefs. There are some people who have an introduction to recovery that is much more freeing and open, but not everybody does. And this is for the people who have been told it's one way. And I know that it still exists because these people end up in my comment section very upset that I'm saying anything other than AA's saved my life. That's the only thing they want to hear. They always want to hear AA saves lives, but they never want to hear about the lives that dogma and rhetoric has taken. Because in their world, the program can do no wrong. It's only you can do the program wrong. So there's so many levels to this, honestly, because obviously there are 12-steppers who just go to meetings and don't have all of that dogma. That is a completely different program than somebody who lives and breathes a book. It's just, while it's called the same thing, it is a completely different program. I don't know. I feel like I'm a little bit on a rant there, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about, natural recovery. And, maybe I wasn't a real addict, right? Like I say all the time, like I don't identify as in recovery. Like I feel like I recovered and moved on, because why do I have to identify as my past for the rest of my life? And I think sometimes there are people in the program who ended up going to meetings, right? And they got better. And they stopped using, but they were gonna stop using anyways. I do want to talk more about this, and I want to do a little bit more research around the whole maturing out and natural recovery. But if 75% of people who were diagnosed with substance use disorder in their 20s, by 35, that 75% of them have either learned to moderate to where they're not in chaotic drug use anymore, or they've quit altogether on their own terms. I mean, that's huge. That is huge. And think of how many people get slapped with this label and they're trying to live up to these unrealistic expectations, because recovery, and some of the things in recovery are just not realistic. I'm sorry, some of the 12-step lifestyle, in my personal opinion, it's just not realistic for so many people. But so many people try to make it work because they think that they have to. Meanwhile, the numbers are showing something so different, and it's so frustrating to me. Finding out the truth has been so frustrating, but it's also gives me the push to get out here, because the truth and the data is backing up what I'm saying. So how can I not feel confident to get out here, right? And yes, I understand some studies are funded by this, that, and the other. You've always got to look at multiple studies. You've always got to look at multiple things, 100%. That's why just relying on the big book and 12-step approved literature is mind-blowing, because you do have to look at different studies and different things that are put out by different people and look at who's funding the study. And I always say, do your own research. Don't just take my word for it. Go and do your own research. It's out there. We are so lucky to live in a world where you don't have to go to the library and look things up. You can look them up on your phone. But people won't do that. Okay, so I guess I'll talk about this here, because if I can't talk about it on my podcast, then where else can I talk about it? So there's this woman on TikTok, okay? She's in her 60s, and she hates harm reduction. And it's not because she has looked up the science or she understands the principles. It's because she has gotten into so many arguments with creators who talk about harm reduction. So she's always, keyboard warrior, just going nuts on, in the comments, and she'll make some little TikTok. She doesn't, not that it matters, but she doesn't have a large following, but she associates harm reduction with people she doesn't like. But it's one of those things that I can see why AA put that anonymity tradition in place, because it helps with keep the message from being tangled up in the messenger's personality. I do, get that part of it because I'm watching this play out in real time with certain people. And when it comes to, content creation and things like harm reduction, and it's not good. In a topic that already has such opposing views, right? If you dislike the face speaking it, automatically these people just reject the entire concept because they already don't like what you're saying. And do they not like you because they don't like what you're saying? Like, which came first? I guess it really doesn't matter. The problem is that people are getting associated with the topic and the message is not coming through because of the dislike for the person. These personal beefs are turning into misinformation about important topics, and it sucks. And social media sucks for that because so much misinformation spreads through social media already. But on the flip side, that's how I stumbled across the truth. That's where I learned to read books like Undoing Drugs and Unbroken Brain and Coming to Harm Reduction, Kicking and Screaming. If you haven't picked up the second edition, it's out. Coming to Harm Reduction, Kicking and Screaming, stories of radically loving people who use drugs. Dee Stout actually sent this to me, which is really cool because she's the author. And she wrote inside, "Tara, thank you for all your support for the book and especially for harm reduction." Dee wrote that to me personally. Like, how cool is that? And like, thanks to social media, I have been able to communicate with Dee. And that's super cool, but at the same time, social media also spreads all this hate and misinformation and all of these people with their recovery content. It kind of drives me wild, like their comeback stories. I'm proud of them and I'm happy for them, but if you know what I mean, it's like they really stigmatize people who use drugs in their story. And then it's just, I don't know, that's a whole nother topic for another day, honestly. Like, that could be a whole series. Oh, goodness. But, here's the takeaway. Evaluate ideas on their merits, not on who's delivering them. Protect the principles of harm reduction. Try not to let people's personalities bury the truth. Anyways, I just wanted to jump on the mic today and throw a little episode together because I haven't recorded all week, and I wanted to get something recorded. I do still have a couple other episodes that I need to finish editing so that I can get those up, but yeah, it's been a week. I got my period, so that's like, I can always tell, like, my mental health right before I get my period, it's always like, it just plummets. Even just my energy for doing the podcast, like, I've been super pumped up about it and working on things. And then this past week, I've just been like so tired. Like, I just could not get myself to do anything for it. I'm like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. And then I got my period and I was like, okay, this makes sense, because I was like, no, I've been doing so well and I love doing this podcast. I don't want to feel this way towards it. Of course, just hormones, which that is another thing we really need to talk about, because hormones and the things in your head, what I used to see happen with some women that I lived with in sober living, like, we don't talk enough about hormones and the thoughts that it can put in our head, and like how it can be so detrimental for people's recovery, and how people need extra support, and being told to just pray about it is not gonna do the fucking trick for most people. All right, my radical rebels, thank you for being here for this conversation. If you've ever been told that you're not a real anything, a real addict, a real alcoholic, a real gambler, Gamblers Anonymous. And that's the thing, is like, there's so many different self-help groups that have spawned from 12-step. Like, that is a whole nother conversation. But if you didn't fit the mold, remember that mold was made by somebody else, and you get to decide what your healing looks like for you. If you're listening to this on Spotify or YouTube, I would love if you would drop a comment. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think that you're someone who matured out? Do you think you're someone who could have matured out, but your head was filled with so much dogma that it carried you way later? Or do you think that you truly have this I don't want to call it a disease, but do you truly think that you have this part of you that is always going to be there and that you're never going to overcome it? There's really no wrong answer because everybody's different. Even though I truly believe that people can heal and move on from their substance use disorder, only you know you. There were truths about myself that I was so convicted on, that I was this person and that I was this addict, and that if I put something in me, then something really bad was going to happen. But then I deprogrammed and I learned things and things became different. So just because you believe something about yourself now doesn't mean that you'll feel differently about it later too. I think as long as you're always willing to learn and grow and do your own research, I can't ever stress that enough. Please, whether it's me or anybody on the internet, always do your own research and from multiple sources, because you can always find sources that are going to agree with your opinion. I think it's also important to look at sources that don't agree with your opinion and then kind of see, where they meet in the middle. In the world of information and where anybody can publish anything and put information out there, it is very important to check your sources and find multiple. That's all I'm gonna say. But stay safe, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time on the Recovery Rebellion.